Juskewycz here with another episode of T2 Green with Daily Fantasy Winners. And today I would like to talk about how to interpret course history in daily fantasy golf. So, daily fantasy players in PGA really like to look at course history. They think it's one of the most important, if not the most important factor when looking to make their picks. While it should be something that should be considered, that can often be misinterpreted and it often can be overrated depending on how you're using the information. So, this is around the central theme of sample size. Oftentimes, when you get somebody that's just the defending champion, Vegas will jack up the odds and essentially take advantage of the public bettors. And a lot of people just seem to think defending champion means a lot, and it really doesn't. It on its own, let me be clear about that. On its own, it definitely can mean something, but there needs to be other things to other pieces of evidence to go along with it. So, but just looking at defending champion on its own, there could be a lot of factors to why somebody was a defending champion, even over 72 holes. Maybe the weather played a huge factor. As we know, when you tee off on Thursday morning, you are teeing off Friday afternoon, or vice versa. If you tee off Thursday afternoon, you're teeing off Friday morning at any golf tournament that has a cut. That won't be every tournament in the season, but it'll be most tournaments that's the case. Then, of course, if you're fortunate enough to make the cut, the better you have played throughout Thursday and Friday, the earlier you will tee, or excuse me, the later you will tee off on Saturday, and the same thing goes for Sunday. So perhaps whether it was you caught the correct wave on Thursday and Friday, or perhaps you played really well early Saturday and the weather turned out to be really bad later in the day on Saturday and into early Sunday. Maybe you played really well early Saturday to launch yourself toward the top of the leaderboard, and then you caught the good weather in the later part of the day on Sunday. There are a lot of different ways you can catch the good side of weather, and it really can play a big difference. The second thing is maybe the strength of the field was different. Usually, the PGA Tour season is pretty much the same from year to year. But sometimes tournaments do get switched around, and actually this season in particular gets a little bit weird because the Olympics is coming back, or the golf is coming back to the Olympics, and there are a lot of events around it later on in the summer that are going to get mixed up and thrown around. The strength of the fields are going to change because there will be some of the best players will be over in Brazil. So a little bit more on that later, but if you're looking at that in terms of the past, you'll also just find the strength of the fields can definitely be different. Maybe even just a couple players were injured, really good players were injured in the past field, and it enabled some of the other players to put themselves in contention, and that defending champion happened to emerge. The last thing I would also say, maybe that player was just playing a lot better as of late. Maybe last year his swing was really good, things were great in his personal life, and he was putting all the pieces together. But maybe this year he hasn't been playing as well. He's been battling a flu bug. Maybe something's going on in his personal life. Maybe he went through he changed swing coaches. He's working on something different with his grip. There can be all kinds of different things. So again, defending champion on its own does not mean very much. We have to know what else is going on here to appropriately apply course history and tournament history. So how do we do that? The first thing, again, is based around sample size. There needs to be a lot of evidence for good course history over enough seasons. So, for example, if I want to find out how this player's done in this tournament in the past, let's say he's played in this tournament 10 times, and he has 7 top 20s, hasn't won the tournament, but he has 7 top 20s and only 1 missed cut. That's usually a pretty good sign of a good sample size. And it depends a little bit on who the player is, understandably, and then what his price level is. But let's just say you've got a $9,000, $8,000 golfer who has had 7 top 20s in his 10 years here. Maybe it just hasn't won it, and he's had a few top 10s in there, of course, as well. And, he just only has 1 missed cut. Versus somebody around the same price level that won the tournament here in 5 years ago, and he had a top 20 last year, but he has 6 missed cuts, or in a couple times where he just barely made the cut. That's usually the sign that that's maybe 1 year he was just playing really well out of his mind, and the other season maybe the strength of the field wasn't as good. I don't know. There can be a lot of different areas. Maybe the weather permitted for his style of play. Again, there could be a lot of different reasons. So we want as many seasons as possible for course history. Now, for somebody like Phil Mickelson or Tiger Woods even per se, you don't want to go back to maybe necessarily course history back in the late 90s. That's a long time ago, and they're completely different golfers now. But you want to get enough seasons, maybe over the last like 5 to 10 years. There, you want some form of a recent history, but you do want to get enough data in there as well. The second thing I'll add on to that, though, is you can find other courses that are similar to the one that this tournament's at. There's never two courses that are exactly the same, but you can certainly find similar correlations in terms of what things statistically pop up, whether it's driving distance, driving accuracy, proximity to the hole from maybe a certain distance, where there's a ton of par fours and there'll be a lot of wedges hit into these greens, or maybe it's long irons. You can look into things like that. You can find a lot of these statistical correlations. You're always going to find it, with people who putt well, like that's of course, but putting has the most variance, as we know. You can usually, though, find some good statistical correlations from tee to green, as far as the greens in regulation or the driving distance or the driving accuracy. Those are some areas you can definitely look at. And then there also can be things of maybe certain players are really good at link-style golf courses, or maybe certain players are really good in adverse conditions. You can look for correlations that way. And maybe some players have better control of their temper and better control of their emotions. There's all these little things you can look at, and obviously the more you do daily fantasy golf, the more you're going to realize that it's not just everything so black and white. You have to look at every tournament on its own and just look for as many matches as possible. And then the last thing I'll throw into this, as far as the course history goes, you can look for players also that have home course advantages or grew up on the golf course. This could be this kid and his family. They grew up on this golf course, and they had he was very fortunate to play on one of the nicest golf courses in America, and he's played this course a million times. It was his home course, and he knows every putt at every point in the green, knows the break at every point in the green. Or maybe this player was their home course for college golf. And it's interesting because sometimes you will find that, some player is from this town and that's where the course is at. He must know this golf course really well. When in fact, this was a private course when he grew up, and he wasn't a member there, and he's played there a few times in a tournament, and he might have a slight edge, but really he hasn't played that course that often, and he might just be more of a fan favorite, which only doesn't really do much for you. It's a little bit of something maybe from the crowd, but not much. And usually something as simple as a Google search, what you can do is on players and a golf course, and you can find out, does this player really know this course out of the back of his head, and has he played there hundreds of times, maybe even thousands, or is it just that, this person's played there maybe a dozen times more than the average golfer? You can really find that kind of stuff out there if you look hard enough. Again, when I say these things, you might think this is something that you would think a lot of golfers would turn up positive results, but you'd be surprised. There aren't that many golfers that are going to turn up as multiple matches here for looking for as much history as possible, finding the statistical correlations to past leaderboards and how they're playing as of late. That's the other thing. If they're playing well as of late also to go along with this course history, not just, maybe necessarily the defending champion, but finding somebody that's really done well at a specific place over consecutive years, or at other golf courses that are similar to the one that's upcoming. Usually, there aren't going to be that many matches for that, and usually when you find somebody that's matching those factors, it's going to be a good pick, and you'll have good results from it. This is one of the biggest things that I do when I'm making my picks, and usually what brings good success. So, and with that, that is it for the end of this episode. Best of luck, everyone, this week at the Waste Management Phoenix Open with their picks. That video is now up on YouTube. And please remember to like and subscribe our Twitch and YouTube pages. And then, of course, you can follow me at Nick Juskewycz and at DFantasyWinners for DailyFantasyWinners.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.